Welcome. This is part 2 of configuring a routing and switch network. In the first part, we went through basic router configuration and also configured one of our PCs. In this particular video, we're going to go over the basic switch configuration. We're also going to cover creating switch security, switch VLANs, and also creating inter-VLAN routing. So let's go ahead and get started right away with that. First, we're going to do the basic switch configuration on switch 1 and switch 3. So we're going to open up switch 3 and we're going to go to the command line and we're going to hit enter. So we're going to configure the basic switch on these. So that's the first thing we're going to do. First off, we're going to go to enable to get into our enable mode. Then we're going to type config T to configure the switch. You'll notice that switches and routers are configured pretty much the same way. First off, we're going to disable IP domain lookup. After we're done with that, we'll change the host name. We're then going to change the encrypted privilege mode password. And we're going to do that with, we're going to make the password class. And then we're going to do the console and the telnet passwords. We're going to type line con 0. And we're going to type password Cisco and the command login. Then we'll do line VTY04. We'll do password Cisco and login. I actually just made a mistake. You might have noticed it if you're familiar with switch configurations, but let me go over that again because I just made a mistake. I'm going to go line VTY and I'm going to hit question mark. Actually, let me exit out of this. Let me do line VTY and then I'll do a question mark. Notice there are 16 telnet ports, so I should actually do this as line VTY015, and then I type password Cisco and then log in. So I made a mistake, so that is the correction. So now what we're going to do is exit out of this, and we're going to put service password encryption to encrypt the VTY and the console passwords. We're now going to configure our banner, so we'll do banner MOTD So banner MOTD, unauthorized access is prohibited, and then we'll end with a special character, and that's configuring a banner. That's the basic config of switch 1. So I'm going to exit out, and I will type copy, run, start. And I'm going to go ahead and do the basic config on switch 3, and then we'll go back to each of these switches and do the VLAN configuration. So I'm going to go enable, and then I'm going to go to config T, and I'm basically going to do the basic switch config for switch 3. This should be relatively easy. So I'm going to type no IP domain. Oops, I typed it wrong. No IP domain lookup. Host name will be switch 3. And after I'm done doing that, I will then do the encrypted password, enable, secret, and I will type the password class. I will do line con 0, password Cisco, the command login. Then I'll do line VTY, and I won't make the same mistake, line VTY015, password Cisco, and login. There you go. That's basic commands. Now I'll do exit, and I'm going to go ahead and put in service password encryption to encrypt the passwords, and then I will put my banner. So banner MOTD, special character, and then I will type unauthorized access is prohibited. There you go. So that's how you configure your banner command. And now I'm done. So I'm going to do exit, and I'll type copy, run, start. There you go. So I've basically configured switch 1 and switch 3 basic configurations. We're now ready to move on to configuring the switch security and VLAN configuration. We'll do this on switch 1 and on switch 2. So first off, we are going to do the first step on switch 1. We're going to go to the command line, and we are going to actually program in the VLAN databases. So the way we do that is we're going to access the VLAN database, and then we're going to create them. Now, one thing I want to point out, if you type VLAN question mark, you'll notice that the VLAN creation is a little bit different than you would have. You would not go to a config T command because VLANs are not part of the running config. So we're going to type VLAN. We'll do VLAN 31. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. VLAN database. We're now in the VLAN database. Notice this is not a config command. We're configuring the VLAN database. And now we can type VLAN, and we're going to type in 3 VLANs. VLAN 31, VLAN 33, and VLAN 99. So I'm going to do VLAN 31, and now I've added it. Now notice VLAN 31 did not get named. It got named with some generic name. To name it correctly, I'm going to go VLAN 31, name, accounting. And that is the way we want to do it. So let's do the rest of them correctly. So we're going to go VLAN 33, name, engineering, just like that. You see that? And then we'll go VLAN 99, name, management. And there we go. So this is how you configure your 3 VLANs. Pretty simple. So now that we're done with that, we're going to exit out of the VLAN database. And we're exited out of the interface. The VLANs have now been automatically saved. Copy run start will not save them. They're actually part of a database file now sitting on the switch. So now we're ready to go in and configure our management VLAN we're going to configure our management VLAN, which is VLAN 99, and we're going to give it an IP address. So to do that, we're going to go to config T, and we're going to type interface VLAN 99, and I'm going to give it a management IP address. In this case, I want to give it the one. I'm going to go back to my diagram. The management IP address I want is 192.168.99.2 on a /24. So I'm going to go ahead and type that in now. I'm going to type IP. I'm in the VLAN. I'm going to go IP address 192.168.99.2, and I'm going to give it the /24 mask. There, that is configured VLAN 99 with an IP address. I can now manage this switch with that IP. Notice the VLAN already has been brought up, so I don't need to bring it up. It's already been brought up. So there you go. That's pretty much how you do that. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that interface mode. I'm now ready to configure a default gateway for the management VLAN. So in this case, I'm going to type IP default gateway, and I'll type 192.168.99.1, which is the default gateway for this particular management VLAN. So I'm going to hit enter, and now I've configured the default gateway for VLAN 99. Okay, now I'm ready to do some more advanced configuration. So let's talk about a couple of these. First off, if you look back at the diagram, you'll notice that port 3 on this switch is a trunk. So I want to force this to be in trunk mode because I don't trust this to be sitting there in auto configuration mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go interface F0/3, right? So now I'm in interface F0/3, and I'm going to type switch port mode trunk. And that is going to take the interface down, set it to mode trunk, bring it back up. And so that's what's happened. So this has now been forced to be switch port mode trunk. Now, also on interface 5, this is going to be connected to router 1. This interface is also going to be a trunk, and this particular is going to be an 802.1q trunk, which is the default, by the way. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go to interface F0/5. I'm now in there. I'm going to do the same thing, switch port mode trunk, and that's going to turn on trunk mode for switch 5. Now you may wonder, well, that one didn't take it down or bring it back up. Well, the reason why is because it was connected to a router, or either two reasons. Either because it was connected to a router and it was already auto-configured to a trunk, or, which is what this case is, the interface is down, so it didn't need to take it down to make that configuration change. So switch port mode trunk. Now, on this port, I want to not only force it to be trunking, but I also want this to use a native VLAN. And so I'm going to actually, forget it. I don't need to do that. The native VLAN by default is VLAN 1, so we don't need to do that. But just in case you wanted to know, you could set a native VLAN here, switch port trunk native VLAN, and you could put the VLAN number in there. Normally, when you set a trunk, you always set a native VLAN. In this case, VLAN 1 is the native, so we're going to leave it alone. But just to show you, we'd type switch port trunk native VLAN 1. And that would set VLAN 1 to be the native switch port trunk. Okay? That's pretty much it on that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to configure an interface range of a whole bunch of interfaces, and we're going to make them all access mode, meaning that they're used for computers to connect to them. So let me demonstrate how to do that. So we're going to do interface range. Actually, if you exit out of interface config mode, then you'll be able to see the shortcut. See that? Now I can see interface range. So I'm going to type interface range, and I'm going to do F0/1 through 2. So I want ports 1 through 2. I'm going to do comma F0/4, comma F0/6 through 24. Right? Because I skipped interface 3 and I skipped interface 5. And then I'm going to also do G0/1 through 2. So all of those interfaces are now going to be in this range that I'm configuring. I did something wrong. Let me see. What did I do wrong? Okay, I figured out what I was doing wrong. I'm so used to a different model of switch that I forgot in the simulator. This particular switch model that I'm using, the gigabit Ethernet module is in slot 1. It's not in slot 0, and that's the mistake I was making. Notice the interface range should be F0, and then the gigabit interfaces will be G1. So that's the correct way to do it. So go ahead and hit enter, and now your interface range is properly accepted. And I'm going to turn all of these into switch port mode access. I'm going to type switch port mode access. So these are all configured to be ports to connect it directly to a machine. Now I'm going to exit out of that range, and now I'm going to go to interface F0/6, and this is the one that is going to be, this is the one connected directly to my PC, and I want this particular PC to be in VLAN 31. So I'm going to make this a member of VLAN 31. So I'm going to do switch port access VLAN 31. So I'm specifically making that port a part of VLAN 31. And now I'm going to shut down all of the ports in the switch that are not used. So I'm going to exit out of this, and I'm going to do my interface range again, and I'm going to use my up arrows to go to that range. And I'm going to shut down 1 through 2, 4, and I'm going to do not 6, I'm going to leave 6 up. I'm going to close down 7 through 24, and the gigabit Ethernet port. So those are all the ports I'm going to shut down. So I'm going to hit enter, and now I'm going to say shut down. And then all of those ports will now administratively shut down. So that's pretty much how you configure switch 2 with the switch 1 with all the VLANs. So now we're going to go ahead and go to switch 3. We're going to add the VLANs. We're going to configure the IP version 4 management, set up the default gateway, force trunking using VLAN 1 as the native VLAN. And we're going to use the interface command to shut down all used ports and put them in the appropriate mode. So we're going to do all the same thing on switch 3. So let me exit out of here, and I will do a copy, run, start to save my changes. I'm going to close switch 1 and open up switch 3. I'm going to go to the command line interface, and it's now asking me for a password because I had that in there before. So Cisco, and then I'm going to type enable. It'll ask me for my enable privilege secret password, which I set as class, and I'm back into the switch. So let's go ahead and go through all of the commands that are required. First off, I need to create the VLANs. If you remember, I got to go to VLAN database, and that takes me to the VLAN database. I can now do VLAN 31, and I'm going to give it the name accounting. There we go. VLAN 33, name engineering. VLAN 99, name management. There we go. That's pretty much how you do it. Now we're going to exit out of that VLAN mode, and then we're going to go to config T. And now we're ready to set up the management VLAN with the appropriate IP address. Looking back at our diagram, the IP address is 192.168.99.3. So I'm going to go to interface VLAN 99, and I'm now in that VLAN. I'm going to type IP address 192.168.99.3, and I'm going to put that on a /24 subnet mask. There we go. So I've got that in there. I'm now going to exit out of interface config mode, and I'm going to give myself an IP default gateway of 192.168.99.1. Both of those are configured. I'm now going to force trunking on port 3 to force that trunk that we had before. So I'm going to go to interface F0/3. There we go. So I'm now in that. I'm going to switch port mode, and I'm going to set this to trunk mode. Now, to force VLAN 1 to be native, you would do switch port trunk native VLAN 1. But this is by default. But anyway, that shows you how to do it. And then we are going to make all other ports in here access ports. Now, I don't need to configure port 5 like I did on switch 1 because I'm not connecting to a router in this case. So I'm going to exit out of interface mode so my range command will work. And I'm going to interface range, and I'm going to type this in. Hopefully I don't mess up like I did the last time. F0/1 through 2, comma, F0/4, comma, F0/6 through 24, comma, G1/1 through 2. Now I'm configuring my interface range, and I'm going to turn all of these into access mode. So switch port mode access. There we go. They're all now in access mode. Very good. So now I'm going to exit out of that range. Oops, I'm going to type the command right. Exit out of the range. And now I'm going to force port 18 to be in VLAN 33. So when we configure that PC, we can configure it in that VLAN. So I'm going to go to interface F0/18. And I'm going to do switch port access VLAN 33. There we go. And now I'm going to exit out of that interface mode. Now we're going to shut down all ports that are unused as a security measure. I'm going to bring up my previous interface command, and I will go ahead and shut those down. I got 1 through 2, 4, and then we'll do 6 through 17. And we're, oh, what did I just do? Okay, I just made a mistake. All right, 6 through 17. And then I'm going to do F0/19 through 24, comma, and then the gigabit Ethernet ports. Now I'm in that range, and I'm going to go ahead and shut all of them down. We've now done it. I'm going to hit exit, exit, and we will copy, run, start. I've now saved the configurations to switch 3. There you go. Now, let's take a look back at our diagram. We are now ready to configure router 1 gigabit Ethernet 0/1. We're going to configure this interface to utilize the trunking to set it up with sub-interfaces so that it can talk to each of the VLANs that we've configured on switch 1 and switch 3. So let's go and open up router 1, and we're going to go to the command line, and we'll have to log on again. Okay, so we've logged on, and we're at the router 1 pound privilege mode. So now we're going to go ahead and configure the interfaces. So we're going to go to config T, and here we go. This is the hard part for those of you who haven't done this before. We're now going to configure sub-interfaces on interface G0/1. So the way to do that is you can type interface G0/1, and I'm going to configure the first one for VLAN 31. And I always make my sub-interfaces the same number as the VLAN. So in this case, I'm going to give it VLAN 1.31. and I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to give this a description so I know what it is. Description, and I'm going to call it the accounting LAN. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and set up the encapsulation to be 802.1q. Encapsulation, oops. And here's where we type .1q, and then I specify the name of the VLAN, the number of the VLAN. There we go. So that is now encapsulating .1q, and it's destined for VLAN 31. And I'm going to give that interface an IP address now. 192.168.31.1. I believe that was the VLAN. Let me go back, look up here. Here's our VLAN information, 31. So I want the first IP to be my router's interface, and that is going to be on a /24. There we go. Did it. Now we're going to do the same thing with interface G0/1.33. So this is our next VLAN. This is the engineering VLAN. So I'm going to type description, engineering LAN, and then I'm going to type encapsulation. Now if you use your up arrows, you can do the previous command and get it in there exactly right. Encapsulation, this time I'm going to change this to 33. So encapsulation .1q 33, and I'm going to type IP address 192.168.33.1. I believe that's it. And then I'm going to do 255.255.255.0. There you go. Now I'm ready to move on to my third interface, interface G0/1.99. There we go. The description. This description is the management LAN. And then I'm going to set up encapsulation .1q just like before. This time it's going to be for VLAN 99. Now that I'm done with that, I'm going to do IP address 192. Make sure I type that right. 168.99.1 and on a /24 mask. Okay. There. Now we're done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of the subinterface, and I'm going to type interface G0/1. Now I'm in the main interface. All I have to do on this one is type no shutdown. And that's going to bring the interface up and all of its subinterfaces. I'm going to hit enter, and you'll notice that the interface goes up and all of its subinterfaces consequently go up. I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to hit exit. So now I'll hit exit again, and I'm just going to copy, run, start. Just to show you what it looks like, I'll do show run, and you will notice that I now have 3 subinterfaces under Gigabit Ethernet 0/1. So now this router, router 1, can now talk to all of the 3 VLANs configured in my switch configuration. There you go. That's basically how you set up VLANing, basic switch config, and switch security.